Hello and welcome to the Answers Yes podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed last week's show with Jack Linscott, all of 95 years old, World War II veteran. What a story he had to tell. But no surprise, we continue to bring great guests on the show, and I'm honored to have Chris Baldwin on the phone today. Chris has been traveling around the world, just checked into his hotel and hopped on a Skype line. Chris, welcome to the Answers Yes show.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. You know, you've got a great talent agent, our podcast booking agent. They reached out to me. They did some research on the show, and they just thought we'd be a wonderful fit. And I'm so grateful to get those kinds of requests because, quality content is so important for our listeners, and staying true to our message. And just in our brief conversation before I hit record, I know that you're going to bring some value to my listeners today.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, with that being said, one of the things I like to do is just dig into people's background. And if you don't mind, maybe just real quick, what is your role in business today? And then take us back to how things started for you when you were much younger.
So today, I've landed in the most obscure of places. I'm standing up on stage with thousands of people looking at me, and they pay me to open my mouth. I've become a speaker, and this is like the least. It's most. I would have never thought I would have been paid to just speak, to open my mouth, and here I am, and it's been an incredible journey over the last few years. Really going from a place 3 years ago where you couldn't pay me to get on stage. I was completely and utterly afraid of it, and I would even to the point where I was getting, nauseous and sick, and my heart rate would go up whenever anyone asked me to say something or do a speech. I'd be the one running away. And 3 years later, now I'm opening keynote speaker, I'm closing keynote speaker, I'm hosting events, and it's just been an incredible journey.
And, I think that's one of the fear, they talk about speaking in public as the biggest fear that most people have. And you just mentioned that you were fearful of that, even feeling sick. But now that you're in it, does that ever go away? Because I'm really curious.
So the funny thing is, it doesn't, it only goes away if you're not challenging yourself anymore. Mm-hmm. Like they say, confidence. Confidence comes from repetition. When you do something enough times, you become very confident, very proficient at it. And so as a speaker, it's quite repetitive, these stages. There's people in front of you, you deliver your message, and they pay you or they don't, and then you repeat it, and you repeat it over and over again. And where it gets challenging is when you're really starting to push the dial. You're starting to get out of your comfort zone, go to bigger audiences, bigger events, change your story up. Trying to have strategic objectives that you've never met before, like for example, trying to get a standing ovation out of the crowd, and what has to happen for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And so you keep pushing sort of what you want, and at the end of the day, we fear what we want, and what we want the most is what we fear the most. And if you really want to get out there and be the best version of yourself, you've got to keep pushing those boundaries and pushing that comfort zone. Life really starts outside of your comfort zone. And the more you want it, the more you fear it. So fear is a good thing. It fuels it fuels you forward. And so it's not about trying not to get it. It's about learning how to deal with it. And that's been the whole crux of, going to the stage. It's an uncomfortable place up there.
Yeah.
And you've got to learn how to deal with that. And at the core of it, it's about understanding that it's not about you at all. In the beginning, it was like, look at everyone looking at me. And it's like, man, all the attention is on me. But it's not. It's not at all. People are paying attention to you because you have something that they want. You have a message, you have a story, you have results, and they want to learn from that. It's all about them. And it's about understanding that they're not judging you at all. They're thinking only about themselves. Mm-hmm. And you are just a messenger up there trying to deliver a perspective that you have on the world. And that's your unique perspective. That's your unique experiences. Nobody else has that. So it's about understanding it's about them, not about you. And so it's very much a place of service up there and just getting out of your own way to help others.
That's a very comfortable way of looking at that. I happened to stumble upon your website when I first met your talent agent, And you have, this is your Chris Baldwin, where it talks about your journey. You were born and raised on a tropical island. And I'm just thinking, listening to you talk about being up on stage in front of thousands of people, like you came a long ways from being born on a tropical island to being on a stage in front of thousands of people.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest question for me to answer is, where are you from? Because I have 4 nationalities. I was born on a little tropical island called Vanuatu, the most obscure places. Not many people there. It's a banana republic. Grew up on, coral reefs, bananas, mangoes, papayas, and no internet, no phones. And then I migrated to Australia, where I did my university, my bachelor, my master. And then I went over to, and of course I became Australian at 1 month because my dad was Australian. And then I moved over to the Netherlands, and where I became Dutch. I did a PhD in medicine in the Netherlands, which I completed in 2007. Mm-hmm. And then I was born French because Vanuatu is a French colony. And I can claim Ni Vanuatuan if I want, because that's the country I was born in. So I've got 3 official nationalities and 1 I can claim.
Wow.
And that makes you kind of a world citizen, but that's many of us now, right? We're with travel and with the internet, we're sort of all over the place with our bodies and minds.
I think that we're living in a wonderful time for that reason alone, and especially considering that we can have somebody like you on this show where this is broadcast, people can get it on the internet around the world, and it's become such a small place, but there's so much more value now. I'm curious, being born and raised on a small island like that and living that lifestyle, how you became an entrepreneur and what gave you that bug? Because when I think about island life, things seem so simple, and why wouldn't it always be that way? But clearly you had a bug to be an entrepreneur and you started doing other things.
So I never shared this story before December last year. It's a relatively new story, and I never shared it because my dad hadn't died yet, mm-hmm. right? And last November he passed, mm-hmm. and that's an incredible story in itself. We might be able to dig into it later in the podcast. But, my oldest memory is my father trying to kill my mother. I was under the kitchen table, 4 years old, and this is a memory that's ingrained. It's the oldest one I can dig into. And it's a memory that really, where I was speechless. I was powerless. I couldn't do anything. And my dad was an alcoholic. And my mum then, after that, became an alcoholic. They split up at that moment. Mm-hmm. And so it was, I think that at the end of the day is what made me into someone, because I had a really tough childhood growing up largely on the streets. I put myself through university, and I was studying under streetlights sometimes because I couldn't afford to house myself. Wow. I still went through and did 12 years of study and got my PhD. And I think what I learned during my childhood is this self-reliance, this ability to get things done and not rely on other people to do things for you. At the end of the day, true entrepreneurship is where you can scale yourself through other people, right? You can basically magnify time through other people. And that was, I think, the biggest transformation I went to is growing up, having to do everything myself and having to rely on myself, to becoming the entrepreneur and having to get out of my own way and start to trust others and start to really empower others to do the work that I love to do. But if I keep doing that work, I'm not going to grow because my time is limited and I need to scale that through other people. And that allows them now to shine, right? Because one thing I learned is that doing the work yourself, as rewarding as that could be, when it's rewarding for you, you've got to realize you are denying someone else of that reward. Mm-hmm. And by offloading it and making someone else happy, significant, recognized, appreciated for doing that work, that's an amazing thing. And so it's about very much, it's about giving. It's about being generous. It's about sharing in the work, the meaningful work that needs to be done, and about enabling others to do that work and play it forward. And that was sort of, if you look at the 30 years, that is one of the big lessons that I learned going through becoming an entrepreneur, and now 12 businesses further. So I've got quite a bit of experience. Nothing big. One of them was very successful. I retired in 2010, mm-hmm. Managed to take 5 years off, bought a house in France, a big mansion, swimming pool, got married, had 3 kids. I did that stuff. And then I realized, I started to have kids and how expensive life really became, right? And then
yes,
I had to
sir.
come back, of course.
Can you give me, not to over dissect what you're talking about, but could you give me a real life example of what you mean by, creating work and then giving that work to somebody else, so that our listeners have an understanding of what you mean by that?
So right now, I'm building SpeakerNation.com. It's really a platform to help people be heard, to really give people a voice and allow them to free their story. We all have amazing stories bottled up inside us. Some of us are fortunate enough to be able to share those stories, and those are often the people doing great work in business, right? They've shared their story, and they've even manifested that through an organization and through a product. Like Steve Jobs, for example. But many of us haven't. And so Speaker Nation is really a platform that allows you to be heard and to free that story. And this is something I could not do on my own. Actually, I'm so afraid of public speaking. And so you got to realize, last year, in 3 months, I grew to becoming the fastest growing speaker in the Netherlands. That was in my 4th month of speaking. In my 5th month of speaking, I was ranked the number 1 speaker in the Netherlands on the top 10 list for 2019. And that was it. That was in my 5th month. So I went really quickly, did a TED Talk, which I prepared and delivered on the same day. The answer is yes. Well, my TED Talk, they asked me the day before, I had every single reason to say no. We might be able to dive into that story later if you want to dive into that.
I do.
But I said yes. I didn't say yes. I said no problem. I think the key to life is to understanding there's no's and there are problems. And when you can combine those two to no problem, then you get out of your way.
I like that.
And so coming back to where was that actually? Can you get me back on track?
Just a life example of showing somebody else how to do the work.
Example. Yeah. I know, from having had 12 businesses now that were fairly small. The biggest one was 35 people. It wasn't big. It was an outsourcing operation in India. But I'm about to build a community and a platform that is going to service thousands of people. And there is no way I'm going to do that on my own. And actually, I'm going to burn myself out in the first weeks if I try to do this on my own. And I'm feeling that already. So the key here is going to be, to build procedures and to build templates and to build, to actually get this stuff out of my head into something that other people can understand, so that they can do the work, so that they can build the company, so that I can focus simply on the direction and making sure that there's a common vision, that people are in the right place, that they're inspired, that they're energized, that there's flow in the team, and that we all collectively move forward. And that's what I mean with, if you really have an ambition to grow something, bigger than yourself, then you cannot do that on your own. You have to get out of your own way, and you have to play it forward through other people.
When you talk about that, the first thing that comes to mind is communicating to those people, your vision and what it is that you're doing. And I know that you're an awesome teacher at the study of communication and helping people in their communication. Can you shed some light on how to be a successful communicator? Because as we build these businesses, we want to inspire others, right, to work with us and help grow.
Yeah, so I mean, there are basic needs that need to be met for every human being. It's you just can't get around that. And everyone has a sort of the different level of the different types of needs depending on the cultures that they're in and what the information they've been exposed to. But I boil it down, and this is not scientific, and it does fall into the buckets of needs, but I boil it down mostly into people need to be heard, right? When you're not heard, it becomes a really, really lonely world out there when nobody's listening to you, right? People need to be heard. So that means as a leader, you need to listen, right? That's one of the most powerful things that you have, is the ability to listen, because now you collect information that allows you to understand the other person and then speak in order to guide them in wherever they or we need to go. The other thing is people need to feel understood. There's nothing worse than trying to communicate something and the other person isn't understanding it. And you're seeing this a lot in organizations. Like And the more they don't understand it, the louder you're going to shout, right? And the more they're going to reject you because, hey, it's just not coming across.